Welcome into our Charter Road Hospitality Studios. It's Hotty Toddy Hotline. I'm Browning Stubbs and got a big show coming up because it's National Signing Day. We're right here at the Hampton Inn at the Oxford Convention Center, and we got a great show planned ahead. We're going to talk some recruiting with Oxford Citizens' own John Davis. He'll give us much more insight onto the big day coming up this week, where many high school kids will make their choices of where they're going to play college football. And Ole Miss, they're expected to have a pretty good class. We'll get some more information on that later on in the show. Also, we're going to talk some Ole Miss women's basketball. They took on the number one team in the nation over the weekend. And also Ole Miss men's basketball. What if I told you that the Ole Miss men's basketball team picked up a 20-point win on the road with only one player scoring in double figures? Well, I'll have much more details on that. Get connected with us. We have a Facebook page at Hotty Toddy Hotline, Twitter at Hotty Toddy Hotline as well. And we want to thank you guys for tuning in with us today. And I'm Browning Stubbs. Great to be here for this fine show. And we're going to have a lot of information coming up. So make sure you stay with us. And we're right here, right at the Charter Road Hospitality Studio at the Hampton Inn, right by the Oxford Convention Center. Welcome back into Hotty Toddy Hotline. And we're going to pick off today's show with a little Ole Miss men's basketball to start. And just about a couple weeks ago, Ole Miss Rebels, they were 2-3, and there was a lot of some shakiness, around the Ole Miss men's basketball team because they lost a home game to LSU, which many thought could have gone the other way, and then Ole Miss lost, a road game at Georgia, and yeah, they almost beat Kentucky on the road, but still, we saw a lot of inconsistency. But the last three games, it's been a different story for the Ole Miss Rebels. They got a huge road win over the weekend against Missouri, and right before that, they picked up a couple big home wins over Mississippi State and Florida. In those games, they actually rallied to come back to win that one. But today, we're going to specifically talk about that win over Missouri over the weekend, and the key thing that stands out to me is Ole Miss won the game 67-47, but only one player scored in double figures for the Rebels, and that one player was a guy who's been struggling the last couple games, and his name is Stephon Moody, starting shooting guard, actually the leading scorer for the Ole Miss Rebels. He was coming into this game not shooting particularly well, as his last two games for Ole Miss, he was shooting he actually only made 5 field goals in his last two games before, but he rallied Stephon Moody, and he came into this one. Now, what was really impressive, it was midway through the first half, and Ole Miss they had maybe a 2-3 point lead in that one, but then Stephon Moody just got a huge tip slam that united the Rebels, and after that they went on a roll and really took command of this basketball game. And Stephon Moody, he really did all the damage for the Rebels. He scored 23 points in this one. Really took command because some guys had some off nights, I'll say, but Stephon Moody, the whole stat sheet for him: 23 points, 5 rebounds, 2 assists, made all 10 of his free throws. Ole Miss, still the number one free throw shooting team in the NCAA, shot 13 of 15 in this one. That's around 87%. But yeah, he was the only guy that scored in double figures for the Rebels. And, first half, like I said, the game was tight. And, there were some other key contributors in this one, as Ole Miss only led by 2 points with 9:37 in the first half. And Anthony Perez, a guy that's kind of fallen out of the rotation in the early parts of the season, comes back the last 3 games, and he's knocked down a three-pointer in each of his last 3 outings for Ole Miss. So that's good for Perez off the bench. Perez actually knocks down another three-pointer later in the basketball game. He finished with 8 points on the night off the bench. And one guy that didn't have a particularly good shooting night was Jarvis Summers. Summers, only 5 points of 2 of 8 shooting, 7 assists for the senior point guard. But Moody backed him up, scored some points, and really sealed the victory for the Rebels. And it was good to see Stephon Moody get back on track. There's no question. I mean, the guy, there was no question that he had been struggling. And I actually talked to him after the game against Mississippi State, and I asked him a few questions, and he said that he feels like he's fitting in really well with this Ole Miss offense, and he knew it would be a challenge going into the season, but he also thinks that he's doing very well with the plays that Coach Andy Kennedy is assigning him, and he really bounced back in in this one because in the last 2 outings, like I said, he was struggling. In those 2 wins over Florida and Mississippi State, Moody had shot 7 of 25, and actually he wasn't even playing crunch time against Mississippi State, and it was good that he bounced back in this one, shot 6 of 11, told you he made 10 of his free throws. I don't want to jinx Mr. Moody here, but by his season stats, he's actually made his last 26 free throws. That's impressive. Just standing at the line 26 times in a row to make them. That's very impressive. But for Ole Miss, they picked up a huge win on the road in Columbia. Missouri, they're a basketball team who started out the season 1-0 in SEC play as they knocked off LSU in overtime, but they've lost some close games in the last few outings here because they played Kentucky pretty competitively. They lost by 16, but that game was very close in the first half. Arkansas, they lost by just a point. The Tennessee game was very close for Missouri. So the Tigers, they weren't just some easy basketball team. Ole Miss really had to go in there and play good ball, and they certainly did that. With the win, Ole Miss improves to 5-3 on the young season. And Stephon Mooney, he said after the game, I came out a lot more calm, and then I got that big tip slam, and he kind of went off after that. So Moody really was fired up after that tip slam. I mean, it's all over YouTube. If you guys want to check that one out, I mean, it was very impressive. But Ole Miss, as a team, didn't. They shot 43%, 24 of 55, made field goals. That's got to improve down the stretch here in SEC play. But great win for the Ole Miss Rebels over Mizzou, and now Ole Miss, like I said, 5-3 in the SEC play. They're now in a three-way, or no, excuse me, they're in a 7-way tie, or no, 6-way tie for third place in the SEC. As 6 teams are 5-3. Texas A&M is 6-2. They're in second place, and Kentucky, of course, is number 1. So it's good to see Ole Miss really bounce back. They're clicking at the right time right now. They won 3 straight conference games, and they got a huge one at home this week against Texas A&M. And now we're going to check into the Joe Lunardi, his bracketology, where last week he had Ole Miss in his last 4 teams in to make the NCAA tournament. This week, he still has Ole Miss right at the top of his last 4 teams to make the NCAA tournament, as he would have them playing a first-round play-in matchup against Old Dominion. So that's a good sign that Ole Miss currently, by the guy who usually projects all the tournament teams, Joe Lunardi, that's good that he has the Rebels in the tournament right now. So we'll have to talk about Texas A&M here this week, as they're going to be a very good team. Well, that kind of wraps up our men's basketball discussion for today. But coming up, we're going to talk recruiting with John Davis of the Oxford Citizen. So stick with us here on Hotty Toddy Hotline. And we're back here on Hotty Toddy Hotline, and as promised, we're joined by John Davis of the Oxford Citizen. John, it's National Signing Week, and it's going to be a lot of stuff going on around for the Ole Miss Rebels, and we want to start today by talking about this recruiting class. And my number one question for you is Ole Miss, are they in danger of a last-minute collapse with the recent news that Leo Lewis has decommitted from Ole Miss?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I do think Leo is probably not going to be part of the class. If I had to guess right now, been thinking about it over the weekend and analyzing it and talking to other people about it. But I don't think it's going to be a collapse, because I expect them to get two or three more kids that are going to be important for the class. It's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be like 2013, a couple of years ago, but I don't think it's going to be a collapse. I mean, at the end of the day, Leo Lewis had great issues, and if he's not part of the class, you avoided having to work on his great issues. If he is part of the class, then you're able to keep him, and you can help him try to get there. He's still got hurdles to overcome if you sign him, whoever gets him. But I don't think it's a collapse. A collapse would be to lose Leo, to lose Drew, and then not have a chance with CC and DeMarcus Lodge and some of these other guys that I think they're going to be able to get. So, I know that a lot of people are upset about it, but that's just the way it goes. The people who get upset about recruiting are the ones that probably are new to it, to be quite honest with you. if you're going to be that upset about it, you probably don't need to be invested in it. I've done this for 15 years, and in 2001 they lost Frank Gore and Roscoe Parrish the night before signing day. Really, Frank Gore. I think Roscoe was going to come for sure, but only Gore had said that he was going to come, and he went to Miami the next day. The point is, this is old hat to somebody that's done it. If you don't know that recruiting is like that, you probably don't need to get yourself invested in it and pay the money that you do to rivals or whoever, or even read my stuff, because you've got to expect kids to do the unexpected. And, most of your kids, the higher percentage of the kids that are committed stay committed. There's a few that do this every year, and for some reason a lot of people get all upset about a few kids out of 15, 16, 20 kids staying committed. So, again, I don't ever consider it a collapse. It's not ideal, and it would not be great because they do need linebackers. But I think if they can close out with C.C. Jefferson and Lodge, it's a very good class, especially considering the numbers.
You can follow John Davis on Twitter at Oxford Citizen JD on Twitter. And John, let's talk about one other guy who's kind of been flirting, I guess you'd call it, with another school. That's Drew Richmond. There's been sightings of him up in Knoxville. And what's the latest on Drew Richmond, and how confident are you that he will keep his commitment with Ole Miss?
I'm not real confident that he'll do it. I mean, I think there's a chance he does it now that he's got back to Memphis, and people start to prey on his, reasoning why he chose Ole Miss in the first place. I mean, I went to his press conference when he announced, and it was always kind of believed that he would go to on other visits, and he went to Tennessee this past weekend. I think Tennessee leads, and I think Tennessee ultimately gets him, unless some of the reasoning why he chose Ole Miss in the first place kind of gets back into his heart. He seems to be enamored with the quick, the easy, the instant feeling of gratification about who he is as a player. That's not uncommon, but it's kind of interesting because I think why did he choose Ole Miss? He didn't have to choose Ole Miss back in September, even though MUS is a school that's had a lot of kids go to it from to Ole Miss from MUS. I don't know. It's interesting to see exactly where his thought process is at this, and I think at the end of the day he just likes the attention. I do think he probably likes Tennessee. I do think he probably likes the opportunity and what Coach Jones is doing up there. But I don't think. I think anybody that is taking a visit at the last weekend, if he's committed to Ole Miss, he goes to Texas or whatever school. That's never a real good sign. Doesn't mean he won't sign with Ole Miss, but if I had money put on it, I'd pick Tennessee right now.
Yeah, and John, I spoke with Drew way back in late September when the Lafayette Commodores were playing MUS in a close game up there in Memphis, and he told me back in September that he was very excited about Ole Miss. He thought that he fit in very well with the coaching staff there and some of the current players. So to me, it's kind of a surprise, but I'm really not surprised either. If there's any school that I think could pry him away, I think it would be Tennessee, because Butch Jones, he's starting to do some recruiting in the Memphis area. So I'm with you on that. But now let's talk about, for guys who aren't 100% familiar with recruiting. Let's start with Ole Miss. What do you think is the number one need on the offensive side of the ball, and then the number one need on the defensive side of the ball?
Well, offensive line I thought was the biggest need for offense. I mean, coming into this signing class, the goal was to sign 4 linemen, and they've got 4. But if Drew drops out, that will be below what they wanted to sign. Defensive line, they wanted to sign 4. I think linebacker was probably the bigger of the two needs immediately. Although after next year, defensive line will definitely be big. That's kind of why they wanted to get 4. Even though they didn't lose 4 defensive linemen, it was more from the standpoint, like that after this next year, they'll have several gone. So, those two spots were the two big ones. The rest were just filling. They try to sign a quarterback a year. Ended up signing two, and then wanted to get at least one wide receiver. It looks like they're going to potentially get two really special ones. One tight end, got that. One running back. They may add another one. I don't think Jason Lewis will come, but they've at least got Sweeney. One safety, one corner. Those are kind of the idea there. They want to get one of each of what you lose is usually your rule of thumb. And then this year was a little different because they had less seniors, so their numbers were kind of tight. They did get 3 transfers, which opened up a little bit, but next year will be the big class as far as just replacing a lot of the guys that are gone, and then probably going to lose Laramie, Robert Kimdichie, and Laquan Treadwell, maybe even Evan Ingram. So next year is a real threat to lose some juniors on top of a big senior class, and next year will be a really heavy class across the board in all positions. But the biggest positions of need coming into this year were defensive line and offensive line.
All right, John. Now let's talk about some guys that are maybe that haven't really been on the Ole Miss radar as of late. Who are some guys that haven't committed to Ole Miss, but you think could probably surprise and kind of change their mind to Ole Miss, kind of like what Van Jefferson did?
To change to Ole Miss from like another school?
Yeah.
Well, I think a lot of the guys that they're waiting on are uncommitted. Lodge Jefferson and Austrian Robinson are uncommitted. Jalen Julius is uncommitted. If they close with those 4, that would be a great finish. I don't really expect them to be able to. I mean, everybody else, like the guys that came this weekend, there was 4 visitors. One of them was already committed, Michael Howard, and the others are uncommitted. I mean, I don't really know of anybody that's committed to another school that's going to jump over. Ole Miss is really looking at guys that are uncommitted and going to choose for the first time on signing day. Their biggest issue is, do they lose 2 guys that they've had committed for several months? Going back to September, and Leo and Drew Richmond.
And John, like at the end of the day, where do you think Ole Miss will end up ranking? Do you think it'll be top 10 or top 20 or what number do you see them possibly ending up at?
Their composite right now is like 21, 22. Rivals has them 23. 24/7's got them a little higher. No, they will not be top 10. Even with a great finish of Lodge and Jefferson, but they probably were never going to be top 10. They had to keep everybody they had, and then finish really strong. They don't have the numbers, they just don't have the numbers to finish in the top 10 like they did 2 years ago. It probably is going to be pretty close to what last year was, especially if they get Jefferson and Lodge, but it's not going to be top 10.
And we're back on Hotty Toddy Hotline with John Davis of the Oxford Citizen. You can follow him for great Ole Miss recruiting news and follow him at Oxford Citizen JD. All right, John, now we've talked a lot about Ole Miss, and let's talk about some of the rest of the SEC as far as recruiting. Ole Miss, they're certainly going to have a good class. You just mentioned they'll, probably be a top 25 class. So, who are some other teams that are in front of Ole Miss as far as recruiting wise, and who do you think is on the rise in the SEC?
Well, I mean, Ole Miss going in on Monday, going into basically 48 hours, a little bit less going into signing day. Ole Miss was 10th out of 14 rankings in the SEC, and yet probably going to be 22, 23, 21, 20 in the nation. That's just what the SEC does. I mean, right now, Bama's on top. I know Auburn, A&M, LSU was, I think, 11th. They're pushing to potentially be top 10, depending on how they finish. I mean, it's just like the SEC West as far as standings. I mean, the recruiting mirrors the field, and that's just the bottom line. I mean, that's kind of how it goes. A lot of the SEC West schools are at the top. like I said, Alabama and Auburn will definitely have 2 top 10 classes. LSU could. A&M probably will. Georgia will be. The weakest of all the power schools is going to be Florida. Obviously, had a coaching change. Trying to think. Arkansas has had a pretty good year on paper. Looks like they'll finish with at least one more lineman that I think is highly rated in Toby Weathersby. So they're going to be solid. It's going to be definitely Brett Bielema's best class. I don't know where Missouri ranks right now off the top of my head. Vanderbilt's at the bottom. Florida's, again, below Ole Miss, which is atypical just because their numbers are down and they had a coaching change. South Carolina's up high. I mean, South Carolina and Georgia are kind of the eastern side of the schools that are doing well. Kentucky's below Ole Miss, but not bad nationally. They're like 32, 31, having a pretty solid year. Tennessee, I can't believe I forgot to talk about them, and they're definitely going to be a top 10 class. So Georgia, Tennessee, I think Carolina probably will be. Carolina maybe just outside the top 10, probably between 15 and 10, somewhere in there, depending on how they finish. Pretty much everybody in the SEC has got a pretty good class from a ranking standpoint. The next big thing to always know or answer, if you're a fan of those teams, is did you meet needs? Did you get everybody that you needed? Or do you have a bunch of athletes you've got to try to find places for? Those are kind of the things that you want to answer. It's great to be highly ranked and all these stars. And while those rankings are important, they do kind of help you decide or determine where you're at as a program, and in time usually translates to the field. The other part of that, the balancing act, is do you have players that can play the positions you need them from a depth standpoint? Sometimes schools get too many overall athletes that just get overall talent, thinking they're going to play some position. They get in and they can't play the position they were kind of projected at. So that's kind of the what you got to look at next. In some of these cases, school may have failed to do that. I know in Ole Miss's case, they're getting the needs met for the most part. Like I said, 2 more defensive linemen is what they really need. They get Jefferson and a defensive tackle. They've done their job there. So in Ole Miss's case, I think they're going to hit their needs. I think in some other cases that I follow, it looks that way. But again, it just all depends on what these schools are looking for and what they're trying to accomplish.
John Davis of the Oxford Citizen joining me on Hotty Toddy Hotline. John, there's also a couple local kids that possibly could be signing a college letter, and the one guy that I wanted to ask about was Mike McGee at Oxford. I mean, he had a great career right here at Oxford for the Chargers, and had a great year this year. And I was just for all of our local listeners, do you have any information on if he'll end up at any school?
Well, I mean, it's Alcorn. He just went to North Alabama this past weekend. I'm interested to see how that visit went. I would think it's going to come down to Alcorn State, North Alabama. At one time, Central Arkansas was there, and Arkansas State was there. So it could be North Alabama, it could be Alcorn State, it could be I would think one of those two actually. But I'm trying to find out exactly where he stands. With North Alabama getting the last visit, if everything went well there, I would think that put them in good shape. But again, I know he's close with Jay Hobson from Alcorn State, and he talked about them before. So anytime a kid usually talks about a school first or a lot, that means they're always thinking about them. So I don't know. We'll find out. I do think I know those are the schools involved. I just don't know where they rank and where he's made his mind up, if he has yet at all.
And wrapping up our recruiting discussion, so John, the Oxford Quarterback Club, they meet this Wednesday at the Oxford Conference Center. So overall, do you think that they'll be pleased and with this class, despite the couple people that might be leaving?
Do I think that the quarterback club people will be pleased?
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, I think they live for that event. So, yeah, I mean, I think that they're happy just in general being up there. And there should be some good news towards the later part. You know, C.C. Jefferson makes a decision in the afternoon as opposed to the morning. There's a couple guys in the morning that everybody will be looking at. But, you know, again, it just depends on how – most people that are upset about Leo Lewis live in the state of Mississippi, or they're scared about losing them to state. Okay. Well, you know, at the end of the day, I think this class is going to be pretty good, considering the numbers. You know, if Leo's on it, everybody's going to be happy. If they're not, then there's some other kids that could come on board to make them happy. There's been more disappointment than not over the years that I've covered this at the end. Not everybody gets what they want. There's been some really good days involving Ole Miss recruiting. 2013 was definitely the best one I've ever been around. But, you know, again, there's some disappointments. There's some times they'll be happy. I think they'll be more happy than not on signing day because I think Lodge and Jefferson come on board. But, you know, again, it just depends on what they want, where they want to rank a kid. And I know that there's some people that are really high in Leo. Most of them live in the state, and that's good. I mean, that's good for them to like Leo, and he is a good talent. But you've got to take it with a grain of salt because these kids are never ever going to give you exactly what you want more often than not.
John Davis, thank you for joining me on Hotty Toddy Hotline, and good luck to you as well this week in your coverage because I know that you'll be a very busy man.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, thanks, John. We'll be right back on Hotty Toddy Hotline. And we're back here into the Charter Road Hospitality Studios right here at the Oxford Conference Center at the Hampton Inn. We want to thank John Davis of the Oxford Citizen for just joining us about a lot of Ole Miss recruiting news for National Signing Day, which is this week. So thanks for John, and you can give him a follow on Twitter, at John Davis, so make sure y'all check that out. Now, we just talked a little while ago about Ole Miss men's basketball, and now we're going to talk Ole Miss women's basketball. That's right, Matt Ensel's club had a tough challenge over the weekend as they hosted number 1 South Carolina. And let's break down this game a little bit. First half, Ole Miss seemed like, honestly, the better team at times. There were times when they had, a 2-point lead, and then, it would swing over to South Carolina. But it was a very competitive first half. It was a lot of back and forth action in the first half. But what was really crazy was that Ole Miss leading scorer Tia Falleru was pretty much not effective in the first half for Ole Miss, as she didn't score in the first half. She actually didn't score until the 30-minute mark in the game for Ole Miss, and they also, Ole Miss didn't get a lot of production out of one player that's been huge this year, and that's Gracie Frizzell, as she only knocked down 1 3-pointer for the Rebels in this one. But Tia Falleru, again, what's been her problem in some of these games is foul trouble. The loss against Mississippi State not 2 weeks ago, she only played 22 minutes in that one. Had she played longer, Ole Miss probably would have won that game. But when your best player gets in foul trouble, it's not it's not going to be good. But Ole Miss did get some key contributions in the first half from Erica Sisk, Oxford's own. She finished with 12 points in this one. So at the half, Ole Miss trailed 36-29, and really South Carolina went on a 5-0 run to close out that first half. So Ole Miss was literally right in that game. Second half, unfortunately, was a whole different story for Ole Miss, as they were outscored 41-30, and South Carolina just went on a huge run there to ultimately prevail the victory for the Gamecocks. South Carolina, they came out, they made 7 of their first 11 shots. They just really played great basketball, and really, South Carolina, what was key was their free throw shooting. They went to the line 40 times in this game, made 25 of them. Ole Miss fouled a lot, and they fouled, when they look at the stat sheet, 32 times compared to South Carolina 17. Ole Miss, they played physical with South Carolina. I mean, you have to. They're the number one team in the country. And there's all this talk about UConn, from the American Athletic Conference and how they always win the championship every year. Actually, their coach, Gino Auriemma, just won his 899th game as head coach there. But this South Carolina team, I think, could give them problems. They're 21-0, 9-0 in the SEC for a reason. So, it wouldn't shock me if that was a close Final Four matchup here coming up. But really, just Ole Miss, in these close games when they play competitive basketball against these good teams, they kind of run out of energy. And that's kind of what happened in the second half. Ole Miss did not do a good job offensively as they turned the ball over 16 times. And then one of the bad stats was 8 of 22 from the free throw line. That's 36.4%. That's got to improve. When you get to the line 22 times, you got to act like the men's team and actually make 80% of your free throws. But they didn't do that in this one. Only 8 made, 5 of 20 from beyond the arc for Ole Miss. So they really did not play. They didn't really play efficient basketball. Shaquilla Joseph was key off the bench. She made 2 threes, 8 points, 4 rebounds for Shaquilla, and one other, Chandrika Sessom, came in and also scored 12 points for Ole Miss. And this loss, it's not a bad loss. Sure. You lose to the number one team in the country. You played a competitive first half. You can't be upset about that at all. Ole Miss lost by 18 points to the top team in the country. So they've now lost 4 games in a row, and the last 2, in particular, have been blowouts that is not looking too good. But they honestly, I think that loss to Mississippi State it kind of killed this team, because Ole Miss, they were certainly in a position to make the NCAA tournament. Sure, the season is not over yet. There's still 7 games remaining, but 3 of those 7 are against top 25 teams, with number 6 Tennessee coming to town here on February 12th, number 10 Kentucky coming to town right here on February 23rd, and their head coach Matthew Mitchell, where Matt Ensel used to be his lead assistant there. And then wrapping it up in Starkville on March 1st at Mississippi State, a rematch with the Bulldogs. Ole Miss, they have their one game this week that will be on Thursday, as they'll play Vanderbilt. And, it's certainly a winnable game because Vanderbilt, they lost to Florida, who Ole Miss beat, and they got blown out by Mississippi State by 25 points, who Ole Miss only lost to by 2 points, and they lost to Georgia. So there's been 3 teams that Vanderbilt has lost to. Ole Miss has either won that game or played very well. So certainly, Ole Miss only won 2 conference games all season last year. Some people, and even Matt Ensel himself said, if you thought we would start 4-1 in conference play, I'd call you a liar. That's what he said. Now the Rebels, they're 4-5. They're under 500 in SEC play, but still, I said it before the season that they would not be the worst team in the SEC. They were projected to finish 14th, and that's not going to happen this year. They're when we pull up the standings, they're right in the middle of the pack. 7th, tied for 7th place right here. So there's a lot of basketball remaining to play, and let's hope the Rebels can get a key road win against Vanderbilt. Well, coming up, we're going to wrap up the show right here on Hotty Toddy Hotline. We're going to talk about some more Ole Miss sporting events that are coming up this week, and I'll mention one former Ole Miss football player that is now a world champion. Stay with us here on Hotty Toddy Hotline. And we're back at Hotty Toddy Hotline. We're in our Charter Road Hospitality Studios, and we want to thank all of our sponsors, these Charter Road Hospitality properties, and, we'll start right here. We're at the Oxford Conference Center at the Hampton Inn, beautiful hotel. Their phone number is 662-234-5565. If you're in town for one of the key Ole Miss basketball games coming up, or, upcoming Ole Miss baseball series, make sure you check out this property, as, they'll have many great deals for you guys, and make sure you mention Hotty Toddy Hotline when you check in. And also, you want to thank our other Hampton Inn, located over at 110 Heritage Drive, and our in Holiday Inn Express at 112 Heritage Drive, and Town Place Suites Marriott located at 105 Ed Perry Drive, all right here in Oxford, Mississippi. So I want to thank all of our sponsors for making Hotty Toddy Hotline happen, and hope to have many more great shows with their support. One former Ole Miss football player won a Super Bowl last night, and that was, or it actually was earlier in the week when it happened, but it was Brandon Bolden, former Ole Miss running back, won a Super Bowl for the New England Patriots, and that was big for the former Houston Nut running back, as Brandon Bolden, he didn't play that much in the game for the Patriots, but when I pull up his the Patriots stat sheet right here, I'm just waiting for it to pull up, but it was, the final score was 28-24 in that game. So shout out to Brandon Bolden. Now let's talk some Ole Miss sports coming up for this week, and the Ole Miss baseball team. They're continuing their spring practices. They don't play actually until February 13th against William & Mary. That's their first series, but they're practicing. There's going to be a lot of news coming up with the Ole Miss baseball team. So make sure y'all follow us on Twitter, and we'll give you guys news on that. Also, we mentioned earlier, another big basketball game on campus that's coming this Wednesday, as Ole Miss will take on the second-best team in the SEC. That's Texas A&M, 6 o'clock tip right at the Tad Smith Coliseum. You don't want to miss that one, as Ole Miss, if they win that game, they will move up to second place in the SEC. And the women's team, Ole Miss women's basketball, they have a road game at Vanderbilt that we were just talking about. So that tip will be Thursday at 7 o'clock in Nashville. So make sure you check out our men's and women's basketball teams at Ole Miss, as they both have two key victories that they need to gain this week. Also, the Ole Miss softball team, the Ole Miss softball team, they will start their season this Thursday, as well, as they got a long road trip, or actually flight, I should say, as they'll go to Tempe, Arizona, and they'll play in a tournament. They'll play Oregon State and San Jose State on Thursday. So they have two big games, the Ole Miss softball team does. And to conclude our show today, there's a lot of recruiting, and that is Wednesday, this Wednesday, the 4th. That's National Signing Day. ESPNU, SEC Network, ESPN. They'll have all that coverage, and there's a lot of guys that Ole Miss they're kind of praying that they stay. There's we talked with John earlier about DeMarcus Lodge decommitting from Ole Miss. We don't know about Drew Richmond yet, so for all that information, make sure that you guys keep up with National Signing Day, because Ole Miss, there's certainly potential for them to have a top 10 class if the guys that commit stay. But if they don't, then it's still going to be a good class, because I don't see C.C. Jefferson leaving Ole Miss, but there's certainly guys that you want to keep, and hopefully that they can, because if Ole Miss has any chance at a national championship in football, it's definitely next season, because Laquan Treadwell, Laramie Tunsil, Robert Condici will probably be their last year at Ole Miss, because when they have a chance to go to the NFL, they might have to take that chance. So Ole Miss needs a good recruiting class, guys that can come in right away next season and help them out. Well, guys, that's going to wrap up our show at Hotty Toddy Hotline for this week, and big recruiting coming up, big basketball news coming up, and it was a pleasure to be able to discuss that with you guys. And we want to thank our Charter Road Hospitality properties, and so that's going to do it for our show. I'm Browning Stubbs, and you guys have been listening to Hotty Toddy Hotline, and it's on the Colonel Reb Radio Network.